It's Tuesday, April 20th, 1999 at Columbine High School, which is just outside of Littleton, Colorado. Two students, seniors Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, were noticeably absent from class that morning. At 11:10 a.m., Harris drives his 1986 gray Honda Civic on the school property, parks in the junior parking lot, and waits. Moments later, Dylan Klebold arrives in his 1982 black BMW and parks. A few minutes later, the pair walk into school carrying two large duffel bags, which contained homemade propane bombs. They walk into the cafeteria, place the duffel bags between two lunch tables, and go back to their cars. Seconds later, the cafeteria is flooded with 400 students ready to eat lunch. At the time, it was customary for students to leave their book bags exactly where the duffel bags were, so they all blended together. Talking with their friends, complaining about not finishing homework, and still catching up on weekend news, the students were completely unaware that two propane bombs were inches from them. The bombs were set to timers that were supposed to go off at 11:17 a.m. Once the timer went off, a small tank of gasoline was supposed to heat up the 20-pound propane tank, which would cause so much pressure that the tanks would explode. Harris and Klebold had gone back to their vehicles to wait on the bombs to detonate. Armed with two shotguns, a handgun, and a semi-automatic rifle, they planned on shooting any survivors that tried to flee. Thankfully, the bombs didn't explode, but unfortunately, it did not stop the terror these two were about to unleash. At 11:19 a.m., a 911 call comes in from a citizen reporting an explosion in a field 3 miles from the school. No one knew it at the time, but Harris and Klebold had purposefully planted a bomb to divert police and first responders away from the high school. After the cafeteria bombs failed to detonate, the two started walking towards the school. Not realizing what was happening, a student named Brooks Brown approached Harris and asked him why he missed a test earlier that morning. Harris told Brooks, quote, "Go home, things are about to get bad." Brooks walked away, being the only victim purposefully spared that day. A witness reports they heard either Klebold or Harris shout, "Go, go, go," and the two started firing off rounds towards the school's west entrance. Rachel Scott and her friend Richard Castaldo were the first two victims. They were sitting outside in the grass eating lunch when they were both shot. Rachel was a devout Christian and had been bullied all throughout high school because of it. When Harris realized he had shot Rachel, he lifted her head by the hair and said, "Do you still believe in God?" Rachel responded by saying, "You know I do," and Harris said, "Well then go be with him," and fired off another round into her head, killing her. Richard Castaldo was paralyzed after being shot 8 times, but did survive. Three good friends, Daniel Rohrbar, Sean Graves, and Lance Kirkland, were next to be shot as they walked out of the sliding glass doors on their way to lunch. Daniel was still holding a Dr. Pepper in his hand when he was shot in the chest, stomach, and leg. As students started running in all directions, Klebold then realized he had left survivors, so he turned back and shot Daniel and Lance at close range. Daniel was killed, but Lance somehow survived despite being shot in the face. For some reason, police and FBI couldn't move Dan's body quickly, so he was left on the sidewalk for more than 24 hours before finally being transported to the morgue. Harris then shoots student Marie Hochhalter, who tried to run for cover in the cafeteria. The bullet paralyzed her, but she did survive. One witness later recalls one of the shooters shouting, "This is what we've always wanted to do. This is awesome." 47-year-old teacher Dave Sanders was in the cafeteria when he heard gunfire and rushed out to warn students. He repeated this warning over and over until he was eventually shot in the back and neck. A student and fellow teacher dragged Dave into a classroom and kept him alive for more than 3 hours before he finally passed. The student had held up a sign to the window that said, "One bleeding to death," but no one came to their rescue. It was said Dave single-handedly was responsible for warning more than 100 students that day. Dave's last words before dying were, "Tell my family I love them." As they were making their way into the library, Harris and Klebold threw flash grenades and pipe bombs at anyone in their way. 16-year-old Kyle Velasquez was the first student to die in the library. As a baby, Kyle had suffered from a stroke, which led him to need special care, and because of this, he usually came home for lunch every day. But wanting to be independent, Kyle had convinced his parents to let him stay at school for lunch. Kyle was playing on a computer when he hid under a desk, but died after being shot in the head and neck. Had this shooting happened just 2 weeks earlier, Kyle would have been at home with his mom. 14-year-old Stephen Curnow, the youngest of the victims, was next to be shot. His parents had said every day in the weeks prior to the shooting he had talked about going to see the new Star Wars movie when it was set to release in May of '99. 17-year-old Cassie Bernal was the next victim. She was hiding under a table with another girl when Harris slapped the top of the desk, said "peekaboo," and shot her in the head. 18-year-old Isaiah Scholes was next. Isaiah was one of the few black students at Columbine who was a tremendous athlete and greatly loved by his teachers and peers. The two gunmen started on a racist rant against Isaiah, who just said he wanted his mom before being shot to death. Isaiah's best friend, 17-year-old Matt Ketcher, was next to be shot and killed. 18-year-old Lauren Townsend, the volleyball captain, 17-year-old John Tomlin, 16-year-old Kelly Fleming, 15-year-old Danielle Mauser, and 17-year-old Corey DePuter were also shot and killed. Once their reign of terror was over, Eric Harris sat with his back against a bookshelf and shot himself through the mouth. Dylan Klebold dropped to his knees and shot himself in the left temple. Despite planning this attack for more than a year, Dylan Klebold had attended prom just 3 days prior to the shooting. He had a part-time job after school and planned on attending college the following year. The FBI concluded that Harris was, quote, a psychopathic narcissist with uncontrolled aggression and a lack of empathy. The FBI stated Klebold was, quote, an angry depressive with a vengeful attitude towards individuals who he believed had mistreated him. Prior to the attack, neither shooter had been diagnosed with any personality disorders. Up until this year, the Columbine death toll has been 14, but that number increased to 15 this past February after 43-year-old Marie Hochhalter died from sepsis directly linked to being paralyzed by a bullet during the shooting.